If you're thinking about downsizing, then you're probably questioning if you should sell the property and take advantage of the $250,000 and $500,000 tax write-off on capital gains, or if it makes more sense to actually keep that property, make it into a rental property, and then potentially take advantage of something like a 1031 exchange later on. Well, in this video, we're going to go over the pros and the cons because I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong answer. I just think it's important for you as a homeowner to be completely informed to weigh the pros and the cons and then determine what makes the most sense for your exact situation. My name is Jarrett Richards. I'm an agent with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, California Properties here in Orange County. I'm very blessed to have been able to hit President Circle, which put me in the top 6% of agents nationwide for Berkshire. So I love what I get to do, but in this video, I just kind of want to go over the pros and the cons so that way you as a homeowner could make an informed decision. The first option is going to be to sell the property and take advantage of the $250,000 to $500,000 capital gains tax write-off that you could actually take advantage of. And if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, that is completely okay. But if you actually lived in your primary residence for the last 2 of the 5 years, the IRS in California actually allows you to write off $250,000 per person, $500,000 as a couple in total, off of capital gains. So let's say you sold the property, or let's say you bought a property for $1 million. And then let's say that you sold the property for $2 million 3 years later. Instead of paying capital gains on that $1 million appreciation, you're going to be able to write off $500,000 if you're married or $250,000 if you're single on that capital gains. So that's something that you might want to take advantage of, because if you lease out the property, then you lose that advantage, because then it's not your primary residence. You would have to eventually move back into the property and live there for the last 2 of 5 years to take advantage of that capital gains benefit. So if you're looking to downsize and live locally, sometimes it makes more sense to actually take advantage of the capital gains write-off, especially if you don't have a low tax bracket to begin with. If you do have super low taxes, that's something that you might not want to do, but something to consider nonetheless. Because again, marketing the property is one thing, pricing is extremely important, but besides those two things, really understanding from the buying of the next property to the selling of this property, ensuring that the tax and financial game plan is completely dialed in A through Z, so that way you're able to move and operate in confidence and take advantage of certain situations and advantages and exemptions and write-offs in this situation, rather than trying to do it later, because once you actually execute everything, you can't go back, right? So this is why it's important to make sure that you have that dialed in before even listing your house on the market. And that's why I sit down with sellers and go over all of that. If you guys already have a tax person or CPA, great. If you don't, I have a couple of recommendations, because I just want to make sure that we're covered in that situation and that aspect before we're able to go and sell the property and handle that aspect, because it's important. The second option is going to be, of course, to keep that property and rent it out. So I do want to be crystal clear. In California, it is not easy to be a landlord, meaning this is not a passive business, and yes, it is a business. Some situations it makes complete sense, especially if you want to keep the property, or you're like, hey, you know what, I want to go and travel for a couple of years and then I want to go back to the property eventually, then yeah, by all means, rent out that property. Or if you bought the property in all cash and you don't need to essentially write off capital gains, I mean, it's beneficial, of course, but some people are killing it, right? So they don't need the money from the sale of the property to be able to go and buy another property, and it makes sense for them to actually keep it. And you could always have a property management company. I'm not allowed to manage properties, but I do have the ability to obviously rent out homes, and I recommend that because it allows me to vet tenants. And there's some properties that just only go to property management companies to find tenants, and it's extremely difficult for tenants to even apply, get into the property, and it's just a mess and headache. So it's much easier to work with an agent to get the property on the market. Like I have a property in Newport Ridge North on the market for $15,650. We do complete photos, twilight photos, floor plans, videos, advertisements, MLS blasts, and a whole bunch more. We even email out to 2,000 brokers and agents in the local area, and we've had a bunch of traffic few applications already and landlords in no rush. That's the benefit, right? Because some situations make sense where you don't need to be in a rush to just get the place rented quickly, or you don't need the proceeds of the sale of the property, so it makes sense to build the investment portfolio. I just want to be crystal clear that it's not easy to be a landlord. It is a full-time business. Now, even if you have a property management company, they're still going to take 8 to 10% of the rental income, and there's still appliances and overhead and costs and other things that you just have to keep in mind and consider. So I just don't want people to go into renting the property out with not completely understanding that it should be operated as a business and it's not passive like you might hear on social media. So essentially, if you were to do that, you could eventually take advantage of something which is known as 1031 exchange. If you already know what that is, great. But if you don't, let me kind of break this down, because this is how investors basically scale their investment portfolio and take advantage of certain capital gains exemptions. So they're not paying more taxes, yet they're also increasing their portfolio. It's pretty cool. A 1031 exchange allows an investor to actually defer the capital gains of one investment property into another investment property, which, like I keep saying, allows them to scale their portfolio so they can go from one property to a bigger property and continuously do that. And they're deferring capital gains, so they're not getting hit with massive capital gains when they sell one property and roll it over. But it's also something to keep in mind that it's not that they could just do that and then turn that into a primary residence. There's certain steps and it's detailed, which is why you need to work with a great tax advisor or CPA to be able to make sure this is executed correctly. But the other thing to keep in mind is we do have Proposition 19. So this is great for some situations, and it could also work as a disadvantage in others. So some people love it, some people hate it, but let me kind of break down what this means, because it will probably be applicable for your situation. So Prop 19 passed in 2020. Basically, it was effective in 21, but if you're over 55, severely disabled, or a victim of a wildfire or natural disaster, you could actually transfer the tax base anywhere in the state up to 3 times. So this is something to definitely take advantage of and to know, especially if you qualify for Prop 19. Now, the one thing to keep in mind with Prop 19 is, let's say that you keep a property and you rent it out. Well, if your kids inherit that property later on down the road, if it is not their primary residence, that tax base would reset. So if you want to give your kids a property and they want to make it an investment property, that tax base is actually going to reset that they pay every year. But if they inherit the property and it becomes their primary property, you're still able to transfer that tax base over. So that's just something to keep in mind. So again, every situation is different. I would really love to be able to sit down with you and kind of understand what your situation is, so I could give the best recommendations as far as how you might want to proceed. I understand I'm not always the best agent for every situation or every person, right? But especially if you're here in Orange County, especially coastal Orange County, I would love the chance to be able to earn your business, but more importantly, sit down and showcase what I'm able to do. I don't work with everyone, right? Because I have strengths and I really play to that, and I do give my properties my full attention. We do full property campaigns. I'm going to do another video that breaks down how I actually market a property, but would love to be able to sit down and review a tailored property campaign to how I could actually promote your property, how we could actually price it that's going to move it in a way where your home becomes the obvious choice compared to other houses that would be potentially comparable or similar to homes or to your market, right? Because what you want is for your house to be the choice where buyers look at it, they walk through and say, this is the one, this is it, I gotta have it, and they're willingly overpaying, or not overpaying, but essentially coming in strong and not giving you lowball offers, because we want to sell that property, right? But before we could even get there, we really want to make sure that the finances and the taxes and that strategy is completely in place before proceeding, because once you act on this, you can't always go back, right? So it's not that you need to do it a certain way, it's just you should do it in an informed way.